The winter cabin mystery. Some places are meant to be left alone. My friend Mark and I thought we were just chasing a bit of adventure, but what we found in that cabin was far more than we bargained for. If you ever find yourself in the woods on a winter night, remember this story and turn back. It started with Mark's idea, as most of our misadventures did. "Let's check out those abandoned cabins near Hollow Ridge," he said, his voice crackling through the phone. "They're supposed to be haunted. Perfect for some photos, maybe even a video for your blog." I hesitated. It was the middle of winter, and Hollow Ridge wasn't exactly a short hike. But Mark was persistent, and the thought of spending another boring weekend at home was enough to convince me. We left early that Saturday morning. The snow was thick on the ground, and the temperature hovered just below freezing. The trail leading up to Hollow Ridge was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. Mark and I trudged along the path, our breath forming clouds in the icy air. He carried his camera, and I had a flashlight and a small pack with some snacks and water. The cabins we were looking for were part of an old logging camp, long abandoned. Local legends said they were cursed, but we weren't the kind to let stories like that scare us, at least not yet. We reached the first cabin just as the sun began to dip behind the treetops. It was small and decrepit, its roof sagging under the weight of snow. The door hung ajar, swaying slightly in the wind. "Creepy enough for you?" Mark joked, raising his camera. I shrugged, but I couldn't deny the unease creeping up my spine. The air felt heavier here, colder even than it had been on the trail. Inside, the cabin was as bleak as you'd expect. A broken table, a couple of chairs, and a fireplace filled with soot and debris. Mark snapped photos while I explored. There wasn't much to see, but one thing caught my attention: a series of claw marks gouged deep into the wooden walls. "Mark," I called, my voice trembling slightly. "Look at this." He came over, frowning. "Wild animal, maybe?" "Maybe," I said, but the marks didn't look random. They were deliberate, almost like a pattern, though I couldn't quite make sense of it. We decided to check out another cabin deeper in the woods. The snow crunched beneath our boots as we walked, and the forest seemed to grow darker, the trees crowding closer together. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. When we reached the second cabin, it was larger than the first, with its windows boarded up and the door shut tight. Mark pushed it open, the hinges groaning loudly in protest. The interior was even stranger than the first cabin. The walls were covered in faded newspaper clippings, all of them yellowed with age. They were stories about missing people, accidents, and strange occurrences in the area. "This is insane," Mark said, shining his flashlight over the articles. "Why would someone cover the walls with this stuff?" I didn't have an answer, but I couldn't ignore the knot of dread forming in my stomach. That's when we heard it, a loud thud from somewhere upstairs. We froze, exchanging nervous glances. "Probably an animal," Mark whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Let's just leave," I said, but Mark was already heading for the staircase. "We've come this far, let's see what it is." Against my better judgment, I followed him. The steps creaked under our weight as we ascended, and the air grew colder with each step. At the top of the stairs was a narrow hallway with two doors. One was open, revealing a small bedroom filled with rotting furniture. The other was closed. The noise came again, this time louder. Mark reached for the doorknob and I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He shook me off and turned the knob. The door swung open, and our flashlights illuminated a room that should have been empty. Instead, it was filled with crude carvings etched into the walls and floor. Symbols, spirals, and shapes I couldn't begin to understand. In the center of the room was a trap door, its edges darkened as if it had been burned. Mark stepped closer, his camera clicking as he took photos. "This is incredible," he murmured, but I wasn't looking at the trap door. My eyes were fixed on the far corner of the room, where the shadows seemed too deep, too solid. "Mark," I said, backing away, "we need to go. Now." Before he could respond, the trapdoor burst open with a deafening crash. Something emerged, something I can't fully describe. It was tall and gaunt, its skin stretched tight over jagged bones. Its face was a twisted, hollow mockery of a human face, with empty eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Mark screamed, dropping his camera, but I was already halfway down the stairs. I heard him behind me, his footsteps pounding against the wood as we fled the cabin. We didn't stop running until we were back on the trail. When we finally paused to catch our breath, Mark turned to me, his face pale and stricken. "Did you see it?" he whispered. I nodded. I didn't need to say anything. We didn't talk much on the way back, and we never went back to Hollow Ridge. Mark stopped taking photos of abandoned places, and I stopped writing about them. But sometimes on cold winter nights, I think about that thing in the cabin. Whatever it was, it's still out there, waiting for the next fool to open that trap door. Some doors are meant to stay shut. If you ever find yourself in a place like that, remember this story, and don't make the same mistake. Stay tuned for more tales and don't forget to subscribe. The woods hold secrets you don't want to uncover.